Jason Miller was the kind of man who believed in hard work. He came from nothing, a single mother, a small apartment in the rough part of Ravenhill, and dreams far bigger than his circumstances. He 28. He was already working at Arden Technologies, one of the city's biggest software companies. He wasn't rich, not yet. But he was loyal. He was the man who stayed after hours, fixing bugs nobody else cared about. The kind of employee who believed loyalty meant something. And for a while, it did. Until the day it didn't. That morning, Jason arrived early as always. But when he walked into his office, something felt off. His computer access was revoked, his ID card blinking red at the door. Security guards stood by, awkwardly avoiding eye contact. Then came the call, "Mr. Miller, the board wants to see you." Inside the glass-walled conference room sat Richard Hall, the company's ruthless CEO, a man Jason once admired. And beside him was Sarah, Jason's project partner and the woman he loved. Richard didn't waste time. "Jason, we've reviewed your activities over the past few months. You've been accused of leaking confidential data to competitors. You're fired, effective immediately." Jason's chest tightened. "What? That's not true. I've given this company everything," but Richard cut him off. "Security will escort you out. Good luck finding another job with that record." Sarah didn't even look at him. Not a word. Not a glance. The same woman he had trusted, the same woman who had convinced him to share his ideas, now sat silently as he was destroyed. That night, Jason stood in the rain outside Arden's tall, glass towers, watching as lights flickered in the offices where he once worked. He was nobody now. No savings. No job. No reputation. Just a duffel bag and the clothes on his back. Didn't know that Sarah had taken his project idea, the same one they had built together, and sold it to Richard for a promotion. And while they celebrated in luxury restaurants, Jason was sleeping under a bridge, clutching a cardboard box as the wind howled through the city. For weeks he searched for work. Everywhere he went, doors closed. His name was blacklisted. Richard had made sure of that. There were days Jason didn't eat. Nights he thought of giving up. But something inside him refused to die. One night, as he sat by a fire barrel in an alley, an old homeless man beside him said something that would stick forever. "Kid, the world loves to bury good men alive. The trick is to rise as something they can never bury again." Jason looked up. The man smiled faintly. And that's when it hit him. They had buried the old Jason Miller, but they had no idea what they had just created. That night, Jason made a silent promise. He would disappear. He would let them think he was gone. But he would return, stronger, smarter, and powerful enough to make them remember his name. Not out of hatred, but to show the world what happens when you betray the wrong man. Jason's new world was made of cold nights and empty streets. Had once lived in a quiet apartment with warm coffee and soft music. Now his mornings began with the sound of sirens and the distant echo of traffic above the bridge where he slept. He wasn't invisible. He was worse than that. He was someone people saw and chose to ignore. Every morning, he'd walk through the busy streets of Ravenhill, watching people rush past him with briefcases, designer suits, and purpose. He used to be one of them. Now, he scavenged half-eaten sandwiches from trash bins behind restaurants. Sometimes he caught his reflection in the glass windows of skyscrapers, pale, unshaven, tired. The kind of man he used to pity. But every time he looked into those broken eyes, he whispered the same words to himself: "This is not the end of me." Jason started taking odd jobs, cleaning back alleys, washing cars, moving boxes in warehouses for a few dollars. He wasn't enough to live, just enough to survive. There were days when he didn't eat at all, learned which stores threw away expired bread and which restaurants gave leftover soup to the poor at night, made friends with other broken souls, people society had forgotten. There was Marcus, a former mechanic who lost his workshop to debt. Evelyn, a waitress who couldn't afford her medical bills. And Ben, a young runaway who dreamed of owning a computer one day. They shared stories, warmth, and dreams. And slowly, Jason realized something. Success isn't just about rising. It's about who you become when you've fallen. One evening, Jason found a discarded laptop at a junkyard. T was cracked, old, barely working, but it powered on. That night, under a dim streetlight, he began to type he had always been good with. Code. That was what made him valuable at Ardent Technologies. Now he used his mind as his only weapon. He spent nights teaching himself new programming languages through public Wi-Fi at the train station. He watched free business lectures online, studied tech startups, and read stories of self-made billionaires. His hunger for food was replaced by hunger for knowledge. Every click, every line of code was a step away from the life that tried to break him. Still, the humiliation was endless. One afternoon, while he was washing cars near a busy street, a familiar voice called out. Turned. T was Sarah. She stepped out of a luxury sedan, perfect hair, designer clothes, and a smirk that could cut through steel. For a moment, their eyes met. He froze, soaked in dirty water and grease. Holding a rag in his hand, she looked him up and down and laughed softly. "Jason, you're still alive," she said, pretending to sound surprised. He didn't answer. "I guess hard work doesn't always pay off, huh?" she added before slipping on her sunglasses and walking away. Jason watched the car drive off, his hands trembling. That moment burned into his soul like a brand. T wasn't anger anymore. It was something deeper. "A vow," he whispered. "One day, you'll know what real power looks like." Weeks turned into months. Jason started saving every penny. He fixed broken gadgets for small shops, wrote code for cheap online gigs, and repaired old computers in exchange for food. Slept less, worked more, and spoke little. One night, Marcus found him still typing on his old laptop, eyes red and tired. "Man, you ever gonna sleep?" Marcus asked. Jason smiled faintly. "Sleep is for people who've made it. I'm still becoming." That line became his creed. Year passed. Jason had built something small, a piece of software that helped local businesses track inventory. T wasn't much, but it worked. He sold it online for a few $1,000s, more money than he'd seen in years. For the first time since losing everything, he walked into a cheap motel, took a hot shower, and looked in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't broken anymore, was reborn, shaved, cut his hair, and put on a clean shirt. Then he said quietly to his reflection, "You were right, old man. They buried me alive, but I learned to breathe underground." By the second year, Jason had saved enough to rent a small workspace in the rundown district of Ravenhill, began building a startup, one that no one believed in. He called it Novatech, didn't have investors or a fancy office. Just a second-hand computer, a coffee maker, and a dream bigger than his pain. People mocked him. Banks rejected his proposals. But Jason had learned something in the dark. When no one believes in you, believing in yourself becomes a weapon. And he wielded that weapon with precision. Months later, a local business magazine published an article, "Homeless Man's Software Helps Dozens of Small Companies Thrive." His app, simple but powerful, had spread fast across local stores. He began earning real money. Enough to hire Marcus as his technician and Evelyn as his office manager. Novatech started to grow, not overnight, but steadily, quietly, like a storm building beneath calm skies. Jason never smiled in interviews, didn't want fame, wanted silence. The kind that comes before thunder. Why his third year, Novatech had become a rising name in the tech world. Investors began to call. But Jason didn't just want to be successful, he wanted to return to the same world that once spat him out, and take back what was stolen. He wanted Ardent Technologies. And he knew exactly how he was going to get it. It had been 10 years since the night Jason Miller slept under a bridge broke. And forgotten. 10 years since Sarah's laughter cut through him like a blade. 10 years since Richard Hall destroyed his name. Now the man they buried had become someone else entirely. Jason was no longer poor, he was a billionaire. Novatech had grown from a small startup into a global empire, a silent force behind dozens of major companies. He owned businesses through shell corporations, invested quietly, and never showed his face in the media. The world knew his company's name, but not the man behind it. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Ravenhill had changed. New skyscrapers, brighter lights, faster lives, but the soul of the city was the same. Jason arrived one cold morning, Stepping out of a modest taxi in worn-out jeans and a faded jacket, he carried an old bag, the same one from his homeless days. Nobody looked twice at him. Perfect, had come back as a ghost, test of character, reckoning in disguise. The first place he visited was the alley behind the bridge. The place he once called home. He found a few familiar faces still there. Marcus had moved on, but Evelyn sometimes visited to help those still struggling. Jason quietly donated thousands to local shelters under a fake name, never revealing who he was. But he wasn't here just to give back, he was here for unfinished business. Ardent Technologies, the company that destroyed him, was no longer thriving. Under Richard Hall's arrogance, it had begun to crumble. Innovation slowed, employees quit, and investors lost confidence. Rumors said the company was drowning in debt and desperately searching for a buyer. Jason smiled when he read that IT was poetic, the predator becoming prey. He wanted to see them before he made his move. Not as the billionaire they didn't deserve to meet, but as the man they once threw away. So he disguised himself again, this time, not as the homeless man he once was, but as a struggling job seeker. He used a different name, Jacob Miles, a quiet, humble man looking for an entry-level position. He walked into the same glass building that once spat him out, holding a simple resume. The receptionist barely looked at him. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "No," he said softly. "But I was hoping to speak to someone from HR." She sighed. "You'll have to wait." Jason sat in the lobby, surrounded by people in expensive suits, just like he once was. He waited an hour, then two. Nobody came. Finally, a young HR assistant, nervous and polite, approached him. "Sir, I'm sorry, but we're not hiring right now." Jason smiled faintly. "That's all right. I just wanted to drop this off." He handed her his resume and left. He didn't need the job. He just wanted to see how they treated people with nothing to offer. And he saw enough. Nothing had changed. The company was still built on arrogance. That night, Jason stood on a hill overlooking the Ravenhill skyline. Ardent's glass tower glowed faintly in the distance, a dying star among brighter lights. Pulled out his phone and made a call. "Move forward," he said simply. Why morning, Novatech Industries had placed a quiet bid to buy out Ardent Technologies' remaining shares through multiple holding firms. No one knew who was behind it, only that the offer was generous enough to save the company. Richard Hall accepted immediately. Jason's revenge was already unfolding. Few weeks later, a meeting was announced. Ardent Technologies will merge with Novatech. The new owner will visit tomorrow. The office buzzed with rumors. Who was this mysterious owner? Was it some corporate giant? A foreign investor? Sarah was now vice president of operations. Cold, confident, untouchable. She had built her entire career on lies and manipulation, and now she was on the verge of becoming even richer. Richard, older and bitter, was desperate to save his legacy. He stood by the window that morning, rehearsing his fake smiles. 9 a.m. sharp, the elevator doors opened. Footsteps echoed through the hallway. Man walked in. Plain suit, calm expression, eyes like ice. Nobody recognized him at first. Not until he smiled. "Good morning," Jason said quietly. Sarah froze. Her coffee cup slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. Richard turned pale. Jason took his time walking around the room, touching the polished conference table he once sat at as a loyal employee. "It's been a while," he said. "You probably don't remember me. I used to work here, until I was accused of something I didn't do." Richard's throat tightened. "Jason, you don't," Jason interrupted softly. "Save your apologies. I didn't come for them." He turned to Sarah, his voice calm but heavy with the weight of 10 years. "You once told me hard work doesn't always pay off. You were right. Sometimes it pays back, with interest." Silence filled the room. Richard finally stammered, "What do you want?" Jason smiled faintly. "What I want? Nothing. I already own everything in this building." The room went silent again. Sarah's knees weakened. Richard's face turned pale. Jason placed a file on the table, documents confirming the acquisition. Ardent Technologies was officially under Novatech's ownership. Looked around the room. the same place that once destroyed him. Now he owned it. But there was no arrogance in his tone, no hatred in his eyes. Only calm. Only justice. "I didn't come to ruin you," he said. "You've done that yourselves. I came to remind you that the people you crush, on your way up, they remember." He turned to leave the door. He paused and looked back once more. "And Sarah, loyalty still means something to me. I hope someday it means something to you too." He walked out, leaving them in silence. Outside, the sky over Ravenhill was breaking into light. Jason stood by the window of his car, watching the building from a distance. Marcus called him. "It's done." Jason nodded. "It's done." "What now?" Marcus asked. Jason looked at the horizon, the same city that once buried him alive. "Now," he said, "we build something better." He took a deep breath. For the first time in years, he felt peace. Revenge hadn't given him joy, redemption had. Wasn't just the man who bought the company that fired him, was proof that no matter how deep you fall, if you rise with purpose, the world will bow in silence. And somewhere in the city of Ravenhill, a legend was born, the story of Jason Miller, the billionaire who once slept under a bridge, and returned not to destroy his enemies, but to remind them what true power looks like.